Tunde, I know about Folasade.
Tunde's whole body went cold. Before he could even find words to respond, his phone buzzed again. A second call, coming in right on top of the first.
Tunde, I know about Ngozi.
Folasade said.
2 women, 2 calls, 6 o'clock in the evening, on the same Thursday, within the same minute. They dumped him so fast before he could sweet-talk his words through it. He had spent a full year making sure these 2 names never touched each other, never sat in the same room, never even existed in the same sentence. Now both women were on the phone with him, minutes apart, and neither one sounded angry. Neither one sounded like she was about to beg him to explain himself. They both sounded calm, finished, already gone. By the end of that night, both relationships Tunde had carefully built and carefully hidden from each other for an entire year would be over. Not with tears, not with screaming, just 2 calm voices minutes apart, closing 2 doors at once. He still did not understand in that moment exactly how they had found each other. He would understand soon enough. Let me take you back to the beginning. Tunde was 31 years old. He worked as a sales manager for a big company in Lagos. He was tall. He had a warm smile. He always knew the right thing to say. People liked him easily. That was part of the problem. 1 year before this story began, Tunde met Ngozi at a friend's wedding. She was 28 years old. She was kind. She was soft-spoken. She worked as a nurse at a private hospital. She believed in family. She believed in doing things the right way, the traditional way. She wanted a man who would take her home to meet his mother. At the wedding, Tunde had noticed her from across the hall, sitting quietly with 2 other bridesmaids, laughing softly at something one of them had said. He liked the way she laughed, gentle and unhurried, nothing forced about it. He walked over and introduced himself, and within 20 minutes, he had made her laugh 3 more times. Tunde gave her exactly what she was looking for. He took her to see his mother only 2 months. His mother liked her right away, the way mothers often like a woman who understands how to sit properly in a room full of older women, how to greet an elder with both hands, how to offer to help in the kitchen without being asked twice. Ngozi began coming to his family's house on many Sundays. She cooked for his mother. She sat with his aunties, listening patiently to their long stories. She became, slowly, a part of his family's normal life, woven into it so gently that his relatives stopped introducing her as Tunde's friend and simply called her our daughter within a few months. Ngozi believed she had found her future husband. She was not wrong about the man. She was only wrong about one thing. She believed she was his only woman. Around that same time, at his own office, Tunde met Folasade. She was 26 years old. She worked in another department on a different floor. She was bold. She was funny. She said exactly what she thought, and she did not care who was listening. She did not want a slow, traditional love story. She wanted excitement. She wanted late nights and long talks, and a man who made her laugh until her stomach hurt. They had met in the office elevator of all places, when Folasade made a sharp joke about how slow the elevator was compared to how slow the company's last salary increase had been. Tunde laughed harder than he expected to. By the time the elevator reached his floor, he had already asked for her number. Tunde gave her exactly what she was looking for too. He never took Folasade to meet his mother. He never mentioned marriage to her, but he gave her his full attention on weeknights. He remembered small details about her life, the name of her childhood dog, the exact way she liked her suya prepared, the small anxieties she carried about her career that she rarely admitted to anyone else. He made her feel like the most exciting part of his week, and for a long time, she genuinely was. Folasade believed she had found a man who understood her. She was not wrong about that either. She was only wrong about one thing too. She believed there was no one else. If you have ever given someone your full trust, believing you were the only one, only to learn later that you were sharing that trust without knowing it, type "I understand" in the comments. This story is for you. For almost a year, Tunde lived two lives at the same time. On Saturdays and Sundays, he was Ngozi's boyfriend. Slow, careful, family-focused. He called his mother Mommy in front of Ngozi in a soft, respectful voice. He talked about the future in small, careful ways. One day, when the time is right, he would say. On Sunday afternoons, he would sit with Ngozi and his mother on the veranda, drinking tea, listening to his mother tell the same old stories she had told 100 times before, nodding along patiently as Ngozi laughed softly at each one, as though hearing it for the first time. On Tuesday nights and Thursdays, he was Folasade's boyfriend. Fun, free, full of jokes. He never talked about the future with her. He never needed to. Folasade liked living in the present. That was, in fact, one of the reasons he liked her so much. She never asked him hard questions. On Tuesday nights, they would sit in her small apartment eating suya straight from the wrapper, watching whatever silly show happened to be playing, laughing at nothing in particular, until it was far too late for either of them to still be awake on a work night. Tunde was very careful. He did not need 2 phones. He did not need secret codes. All he needed was a good memory and a good schedule. He kept a small mental calendar in his head at all times, tracking which version of himself belonged to which day, careful never to let one world's small details slip into the other. He kept Ngozi's world and Folasade's world completely separate. Different days, different friends, different restaurants, different playlists in his car, switched carefully before each visit. He made sure the 2 women never had any reason to be in the same place at the same time, avoiding certain neighborhoods entirely, choosing his words with unusual precision whenever either woman asked about his weekend plans. For almost a year, this careful plan worked perfectly. Then something happened that Tunde could never have planned for. Something small, something he never even knew about until it was already far too late to stop it. His company offered a professional development course to certain staff members. The course ran every Wednesday evening for 8 weeks at a training center outside the office. Tunde was not selected for the course, but 2 other employees from his company were selected. One of them was Folasade. The second person selected for the course did not work at Tunde's company at all. She had been sent by a different company that had partnered with Tunde's company for the training. Her name was Ngozi, not the nurse Ngozi from Tunde's Sunday life, a different woman entirely who happened to share the same name. Wait, let me slow down here because this next part matters and I do not want you to miss it. The Ngozi who took the training course was not the same Ngozi that Tunde was dating. But something strange happened anyway. On the very first night of the course, during a short break, Folasade and this new Ngozi sat next to each other. They started talking, the way strangers sometimes do, simply to pass the time.
What is your name?
Folasade asked.
Ngozi. And you? Folasade.
They laughed a little at how easily their names had come up, 2 very common Nigerian names, nothing unusual about that at all. They talked about their jobs, they talked about the traffic on their way to the training center, small talk, nothing important. But somewhere in that small talk, Folasade mentioned, without thinking much of it, that her boyfriend always disappeared on Sunday afternoons for family time, and that she had learned a long time ago not to ask too many questions about it. The new Ngozi laughed. My boyfriend does something like that too, she said. Every single Sunday without fail. Family this, family that. Sometimes I wonder if these Lagos men simply invented family time as an excuse to rest from us. They both laughed. It felt in that moment like nothing more than 2 women joking about ordinary things. Neither of them knew yet how important that small joke would become. If you have ever had a small, ordinary conversation that later turned out to be the beginning of something enormous, type "small talk, big truth" in the comments. Sometimes the biggest discoveries start in the smallest places. Over the following weeks, Folasade and this new Ngozi became real friends. They sat together every Wednesday. They started meeting for coffee before the class began. They talked about their families, their jobs, their dreams for the future. And slowly, without either of them planning it, they talked more and more about their boyfriends. Folasade mentioned that her man was tall, always well-dressed, worked in sales, and always smelled faintly of a particular cologne she liked. The new Ngozi laughed and said her own boyfriend wore a similar cologne and worked in sales too, though at a different company, or so she believed. They both thought it was simply a funny coincidence. Lagos was a big city, but certain things repeated themselves. Certain colognes were popular, certain jobs were common. It did not seem strange, not yet, for two boyfriends to share small similarities. Then one evening, Folasade complained lightly that her man was always busy on Sunday afternoons visiting his mother with the woman his mother liked, a phrase he had used once carelessly without realizing how strange it sounded. The new Ngozi went very quiet.
What did you say his name was?
She asked slowly. Folasade blinked.
I never said his name. Say it.
Her voice had changed completely. It was no longer light or joking. Folasade felt something cold settle in her stomach, though she could not yet explain why. Tunde, she said quietly. That is my boyfriend's name too, she said. If you have ever felt the floor shift beneath you the moment two small details suddenly connected, type "the floor shifted" below. That feeling never fully leaves you even after everything makes sense. For a long moment, neither woman said anything. Then slowly, carefully, like two people building something delicate out of broken pieces, they began to compare everything. His height, his job, his cologne, the name of his mother, Mrs. Adebayo, the specific street where his mother lived, the specific way he said, "one day, when the time is right," whenever the topic of marriage came up. Every single detail matched. There was no mistake. There was no coincidence left standing. The Tunde that Folasade had spent a year with and the Tunde that this new Ngozi had spent a year with were the exact same man. Folasade sat back slowly in her chair, her hands trembling slightly around her now cold coffee. Ngozi's eyes filled with tears, although her voice stayed remarkably steady. 1 year, she whispered. 1 full year, and I never once suspected. Neither did I, Folasade said quietly. He was very good at this. If you have ever discovered all at once that a year of your life had been built on something you never fully understood, type 1 full year in the comments. I want to know how many of us have lived through something like this. Over the following weeks, Folasade and this new Ngozi did not confront Tunde. They did not scream, they did not cry in front of him. They did not even let him know through a single word or a single changed behavior that anything had shifted at all. Instead, they began quietly building a complete picture of the truth. They met twice more that week, not at the training center, but at Ngozi's apartment, where they could talk freely without worrying about being overheard. They sat cross-legged on Ngozi's living room floor, their phones spread out between them like pieces of a puzzle neither of them had wanted to solve. They compared photographs first. A photo of Tunde at a birthday party, laughing with his arm around Folasade, matched almost exactly in lighting and background to a photo Ngozi had of him at what she had believed was a work colleagues' gathering. It was the same event. He had simply told each woman a different story about who else would be there. They compared old text messages next, noticing patterns they had never noticed before, patterns that only became visible once two people's information sat side by side. A cancelled dinner on one side matched perfectly with a spontaneous outing on the other. A busy weekend with family matched almost every single time with a quiet weekend spent entirely with the other woman. They discovered that Tunde's long work trips on certain weekends had actually been quiet weekend visits with Ngozi's family up country. Trips he had described to Folasade as unavoidable business travel, complete with small invented details about difficult clients and long meetings that never happened. They discovered that his family emergency one particular Tuesday, the single time he had ever cancelled on Folasade without much explanation, had actually been Ngozi's birthday, a day he had spent entirely with her, pretending to Folasade that something serious had come up at home. Folasade remembered worrying about him that entire evening, sending him concerned messages he had answered only briefly, claiming he was too overwhelmed to talk. Piece by piece, the full shape of the lie became clear. Not a small mistake, not a moment of weakness. An entire structure built carefully over a full year, with two separate lives running side by side, each one completely hidden from the other, each one requiring constant small lies to keep standing. The two women did not become enemies over this discovery the way many people might expect. They became something else entirely. They became allies. Have you ever noticed how the truth sometimes brings together the very people it was meant to keep apart? If you understand what it means to find an unexpected ally inside your own pain, type unexpected allies in the comments. Ngozi and Folasade began meeting outside of the Wednesday class now, specifically to talk through what they wanted to do next. There was no dramatic plan for public revenge, no plan to humiliate Tunde in front of his friends or his family. Both women, in their own separate ways, decided the same thing without needing to convince each other of it. They did not want a performance. They wanted the truth to end quietly, cleanly, completely on their own terms. I do not want him to give him the satisfaction of watching me fall apart, Ngozi said one evening, stirring her tea slowly. He does not deserve to see that from me. I do not want him to have a chance to explain himself either, Folasade said. Men like this are good with words. That is exactly how he built this whole thing in the first place. I do not want to give him a stage. They agreed on something simple, something quiet, something powerful in its simplicity. They would end things with him on the exact same day, at the exact same hour, separately, without either woman knowing exactly what the other one said, but both of them finishing at the same moment, so that whatever explanation Tunde tried to build in his mind, he would have no time to build it before the second call came. But before that day arrived, they decided on something else too. Something smaller, something that would only make sense to two women who now understood the full shape of the man they were dealing with. They decided to let him feel the two lives colliding just a little, without ever letting him understand why. It started small. Ngozi mentioned casually that she had heard a rumor about a woman in his office who likes suya a particular way, wrapped a particular way, the exact way Folasade always ordered hers. Tunde laughed nervously and changed the subject, his mind quietly racing, wondering how such a specific detail had reached her. 2 days later, Folasade mentioned, just as casually, that she had heard he had a favorite auntie who called him the reliable one, a phrase Ngozi's family used, a phrase Folasade had never once heard him directly. Tunde began to feel a strange, low hum of unease that he could not explain. He told himself he was imagining things. He told himself Lagos was simply a small world, that two women could not possibly know things about each other's worlds by accident. But the small collisions kept happening. Ngozi cancelled a Sunday visit at the very last moment. The same weekend, Folasade suddenly insisted on trying a new restaurant he had once taken Ngozi to, describing it in exact detail as though she already knew the menu. Folasade asked him out of nowhere whether his mother preferred jollof rice or fried rice at family gatherings, a question he had only ever discussed with Ngozi. Tunde began losing sleep. He began double-checking his own messages before sending them, terrified he had confused one woman's name for the others, though he never once had. He began arriving early to meet each woman, nervous and unsettled, unable to explain even to himself why his stomach tightened every time his phone rang. He had no idea that Ngozi and Folasade spoke almost daily now, comparing notes carefully, choosing their small comments with precision, never enough to expose the truth outright, only enough to keep him permanently off balance, enough to make him tired, enough to make him doubt his own careful planning for the very first time in a year. If you have ever quietly unsettled someone who had once made you feel unsettled without ever needing to explain yourself, type "quiet justice" in the comments. Sometimes the loudest revenge is the one nobody can see coming. By the third week, Tunde was exhausted in a way he could not name. He found himself short-tempered with colleagues. He found himself staring at his phone for long minutes before replying to either woman, searching for traps that were not really traps at all, only the accumulated weight of a year finally beginning to catch up with him. He never once suspected the two women were the cause. He only knew in some instinctive way beneath his understanding that something in his careful world had started to feel unsteady beneath his feet. That was exactly when Ngozi and Folasade decided it was time. They set the date, a Thursday, 3 weeks after that first quiet decision to let his two worlds finally start colliding. If you have ever needed to plan your peace as carefully as someone once planned their lies, type "peace takes planning too" below. Sometimes living well just takes as much care as staying did. The 3 weeks that followed were strange ones for Tunde, though he had no idea why. He continued his normal routine, unaware that anything had changed. He sent Ngozi sweet messages about their Sunday plans. He told Folasade he had already started planning something special for their next Tuesday night. Both women changed their behavior towards him exactly the same way they always had. They answered his messages the same way they always had. They laughed at his jokes the same way they always had. It was for both of them one of the hardest performances of their lives, pretending that nothing at all had changed, while carrying inside themselves the full and complete truth. But they had agreed it mattered. If Tunde sensed anything early, he might try to get ahead of the truth, might try to reach one woman before the other, might try to twist the story before either of them had the chance to finish it in their own way. So they waited, patiently, quietly, together, though separately. On the Thursday they had chosen, Ngozi called Tunde first at exactly 6 o'clock in the evening. She had spent the afternoon preparing herself, not with anger, but with a strange kind of calm she had practiced in her mind for days. She sat alone in her apartment, phone in hand, and took one slow breath before dialing his number. "Tunde," she said, her voice calm, steady, almost gentle. "I know about Folasade." There was a long silence on the phone. She could hear him breathing, could almost picture the exact expression that must have crossed his face in that moment. The same warm, easy expression he used whenever he needed a moment to think of the right thing to say. "Tunde, I can explain." "I do not want an explanation," she said simply. "I only want you to know that this is over. I am not angry enough to scream at you. I am not sad enough anymore to cry in front of you. I have already cried enough this month without you knowing it. Please just let me—" "Goodbye, Tunde," she said, and ended the call. She sat with the phone still in her hand for a long moment afterward, waiting to feel something enormous. Instead, she felt something smaller, quieter, and strangely more valuable: relief. At exactly 6 o'clock the same evening, Folasade called him too. His phone had not even finished processing the first missed call notification from Ngozi before Folasade's call came through, the two names appearing on his screen almost on top of each other. "Tunde, Folasade said, her voice light but firm, almost eerily calm. I know about Ngozi. Tunde felt his whole body go cold, his mind scrambling to understand how two separate conversations could possibly be happening within the same minute. Folasade, wait, please. I am not waiting, she said. I already waited a year without knowing I was waiting. I am done waiting now. How did you? Does it matter? She asked. You spent a year keeping two women apart so carefully. You never once thought about what would happen if we ever found each other on our own. We did. And Tunde, I promise you, finding each other was the best thing that happened to either of us this whole year. She ended the call before he could say another word, setting her phone face down on the table beside her, exhaling slowly, a full year finally releasing itself from her shoulders in a single breath. If you have ever ended something calmly on your own terms, exactly when you chose to, rather than when the other person expected it, type "my terms" in the comments. That kind of ending stays with you differently. Tunde sat alone in his apartment that night, staring at his phone. Two missed calls sitting side by side on the screen. Both ended at almost the exact same minute. He tried calling Ngozi back. She did not answer. He tried calling Folasade back. She did not answer either. He sent messages to both women, long messages full of apologies, full of explanations he had not been given the chance to say out loud. He told Ngozi that Folasade had meant nothing serious, a mistake from early on that he had never known how to end. He told Folasade in an entirely different message that Ngozi had simply been a family arrangement he had never fully committed to, nothing like what he shared with her. Neither woman replied, neither woman ever would again. For the first time in a year, Tunde understood fully and completely that both of his carefully separated lives had ended on the exact same evening, without his permission, without his input, and without either woman ever needing to raise her voice even once. He had spent a year making sure Ngozi and Folasade never discovered each other. He never once considered what might happen if they discovered each other and decided, quietly, together, that they trusted one another far more than they had ever trusted him. In the weeks that followed, Ngozi and Folasade remained close friends. What had started as an accidental Wednesday evening conversation had grown into a real, lasting friendship built on something neither of them had expected: honesty, something Tunde had never fully given to either of them. They met for coffee most weekends now, not out of habit born from him, but because they had genuinely come to enjoy each other's company. They spoke about their families, their careers, their hopes, the same easy conversations that had once accidentally uncovered his lies, now simply the normal texture of a real friendship. They did not speak about him often. When they did, it was usually with a strange, quiet kind of humor rather than bitterness. The kind of humor that only comes once real pain has already had its proper turn and finally settled. Ngozi once joked that she should send Tunde a thank you card for accidentally introducing her to one of the best friends she had ever had. Folasade laughed so hard that she nearly spilled her coffee.
Ngozi eventually returned fully to her work at the hospital, throwing herself into it with new energy, eventually earning a promotion to a senior nursing position she had quietly wanted for years but never had the full confidence to pursue. Folasade continued at her company, though she requested and received a transfer to a different department entirely, one with no connection at all to sales. A fresh start, she said, made the whole building feel lighter to walk into every morning. Tunde tried, for a while, to explain himself to mutual friends, to his own mother, to anyone who would listen. His mother, upon learning the full truth, was quietly heartbroken, not only for the pain caused to two women she had never even properly known existed side by side, but for the son she realized she had perhaps taught to be too comfortable with easy charm and not comfortable enough with hard honesty. But the story that mattered most was never really about him at all.
It became, instead, a story about two women who had every reason to become rivals and instead became something far stronger. If you have ever turned pain into an unexpected friendship, something that outlasted the very person who caused the pain in the first place, I want you to know something important. Sometimes the truth does not just end something. Sometimes it also begins something better than what came before it. There is an old saying that Ngozi's grandmother used to tell her as a child, long before any of this happened. A man can keep two fires burning in two different houses, but smoke always finds its way to the sky eventually, and from high enough, the sky sees both fires burning at once. Tunde had built his two lives carefully on the ground in separate houses, believing distance alone would keep them apart forever. He forgot to consider the sky. This is Ngozi and Folasade's story. But somewhere tonight, it might be yours too.
Thank you so much for staying with us until the very end of our story. This is Tales by Tyron, where every story carries a lesson, a little mystery, and a piece of Africa. If you enjoyed this story, if it touched your heart, or if you simply love African folk tales, please share this story with a friend. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Turn on your notifications because you never know what story will bring you next. Until then, take care of yourself. And remember, every story has a lesson. See you in our next story.